Hi, I'm PChenoweth. I'd like you to meet my friend the hog, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. But first, when it comes to interaction, today we are focusing on human interaction skills. Now, the continued importance of human interaction skills were brought to great focus by one experience of two Stanford researchers. They were tasked to evaluate a leadership program at a plywood mill in Northeast Oregon. So in order to complete this task, the researchers drove up to this plywood mill, which was out in the middle of nowhere. And as they were pulling into the parking lot, they noticed an ambulance out front of the main building. And I thought, well, obviously somebody got hurt, and it didn't really surprise them because there's a lot of big machines at a plywood mill, and there's a lot of saws there too. So they got out of the car and started walking towards the building, and then all of a sudden the two front doors slammed open, and the emergency responders came out of the building with the gurney, and somebody was on the gurney covered in blood. So this gave them a little bit of a pause, but they went ahead and went into the lobby, and the plant foreman was there waiting for them. He was a very friendly person and didn't seem very upset despite what was going on with the ambulance out front. So the researchers had to ask, what happened? And the plant manager just shook his head, crossed his arms, and said, well, a supervisor and an employee got into a scuffle today. And the researchers' first thought was, oh my gosh, this is a very primitive management style where, you don't like a supervisor, you get into a scuffle. But they realized that wasn't really true, but they were interested in learning more. So the plant foreman offered to take them on a tour, and he was going to show them what they did at the plywood mill. So the main thing they do is they make veneer. And to do that, they take a log, just a tree trunk, and put it on a large-scale lathe. And that lathe turns the log quite fast. And as that log is turning, the machine peels off thin layers of wood, and that creates the sheets of veneer. Now what the plant is looking for, the company is looking for, is some flawless, clean veneer, because that's worth the most. And they take those sheets of veneer and glue them to plywood. They're packaged up, distributed, and sold at market. Now there's two other items that come off this large lathe, this large machine. And another type of veneer is a little bit less quality of veneer. And this could be of less quality because of knots in the wood or it's tattered. So they take pieces of that veneer and glue them together and put that on plywood, and they also sell that, but not for as much money. And then the last type of product that comes out is veneer that just can't be used as veneer at all. And they take those and put them in a machine that they call the hog. And this grinds up the chips of veneer into pulp that can then be used to make paper. So, just to recap, there's three different types: flawless, lower quality veneer, and then chips, which are of a low value. So you have a high value of flawless veneer, and then a low value of chips that are used for paper. Now, in addition, the plant foreman shared with them that this machine, the hog, is quite dangerous. So when employees go in there, in order to work in there, they have to be put in a harness and tethered so that they can't get too close to the machine. So kind of think about, an animal on its leash. So when you're walking your dog, for example, kind of pull on the leash to make sure nothing happens to him or her. So this is what the researchers learned about the hog. After the plant tour, the researchers asked if they could start interviewing the employees about the leadership program. And one of the researchers sat down with an employee and asked the typical battery of questions. But because of what happened earlier in the day, the researcher asked the employee, so what do you do when you don't get along with the supervisor? And the employee looked at the researcher and just said, the hog. So the researcher was imagining that employees, when they didn't like a supervisor, were just throwing supervisors into this chipping machine. But the employee continued and said that they don't throw the boss into the hog, but rather they put good veneer into the hog. And the reason they do that is to kill the productivity of a certain supervisor. So they do this during a specific supervisor's shift. So, in other words, in order to make a supervisor look bad, employees take good veneer and put it in the hog, and that doesn't produce as much higher quality veneer. It's amazing how some people can come up with these types of ideas in order to reduce productivity and sabotage the business. Certainly an interesting approach. So as a result of hearing about this experience, the researchers dubbed the concept the law of the hog. Now, this isn't just something that occurs between supervisors and employees or workers. This can also happen between a supervisor and a manager. For example, a supervisor was in line for promotion to a manager, and the company ended up hiring somebody outside the company because this person had a track record of high productivity. And this upset the supervisor a little bit. So a way to use the law of the hog or feed the hog against the manager was to change the number of hours that employees were actually working. So for example, employees were measured based on how many widgets they made within a 7-hour period, which was a typical workday. Now, if an employee came late to work, had a doctor's appointment, or maybe took a longer lunch, that time is typically subtracted from the 7 work hours. But this supervisor didn't subtract that time. So while the employee may have just worked actually 5 hours, the supervisor showed 7 hours of work. So that showed a lower productivity rate, just to sabotage this new manager. So this supervisor was able to show that productivity reduced, and the only thing that had changed was hiring this new manager. Now, in addition, it's not just internally that the law of the hog can be administered. Another example is a waitress. She didn't particularly get along with her boss. She didn't like the work shift, and she didn't like the tasks he was giving her. So she fed the hog by not providing good customer service to her customers. And so customers would leave dissatisfied and likely not come back. Now, as you know, think about what do people do when they have bad experiences at companies. They go online and they use social media to share their experience. So not only was she giving them bad service, but she often knew that customers would go onto Yelp, for example, and put in a bad review for that restaurant. So that, could affect new customers from coming in and stop return customers. Because I don't know about you, but I tend to look at Yelp reviews if I haven't been to a place, just to get an idea of what some people are saying about their experiences at those places. So that, again, is sabotaging the business, and a lot of customers are left that restaurant with a bad taste in their mouth. There are different ways that we all can feed the hog, and we all may have fed the hog. So sabotage is a small portion of the damage that can occur because of the law of the hog. And the most common form of feeding the hog is when employees react passively. Now, these examples that I shared with you, they were passive acts, but sabotage and created problems for the business. Now, think over your own career. Have you ever experienced or observed somebody sabotaging the business where it would be classified under the law of the hog? So let's make a list on this board of the different laws of the hog that you've experienced. That's a great example. So what you shared with us is called malicious compliance, and we're going to review that concept next. Thank you.